had Bill Osheroff talk, who came on the scene. Bill? And by the way, Bill was one hell of a surgeon, because he and Ken Rosenberg went on a lot of med camps to help the civilians out there in the various villages, you know, taking care of the little ones that really needed it. And Ken spoke Vietnamese, so he was a caring guy, and he also did a hell of a job taking care of us in the battalion.
Thank you. I think that, can you all hear me? Yes. I'm told that I speak softly, but I do carry big sticks, so be careful. I think the stage has been set for what has happened. And he picked me up at the fire base. Colonel Blag and I flew to the site of the crash, and it was very apparent, although we had resuscitation IVs and fluid and IV starter kits and all of what we thought we might need if we found survivors, it wasn't very long before my conclusion was that there would be no survivors. I'm not going to tell you what we saw. You don't want to hear it, and I can't say it. But I want to posit to you that I think asking the question, what did we see and what happened on the ground, may not be the right question. I'd rather ask the question, what happened to the guys up in the helicopter? What did they go through? I think you may get more out of that than listening to a discussion about what did we find and how traumatic was that for me personally. I've carried that for 50 years and I can't get past it. Probably never will. But I also was in a helicopter crash of my own. Not my own helicopter, but a helicopter crash. We were flying along. It was one of these log days. And I was in the helicopter with the two door gunners and the two pilots, and I liked to watch the instruments, because I had taken some flying lessons before going to Vietnam. And we were flying along, everything was fine, the engine sounded fine, and all of a sudden, this big red light went on in the middle of the cockpit, and the engine started to sound strained. And I knew immediately that this was not normal, because I'd never seen this red light on before. And I had watched the panel of the helicopters I'd been on for every trip I'd been on, and it had been several. It became apparent to me that at that moment that we weren't flying. And so I became concerned, and my first question was, what's happening? And I didn't know. All I knew was the helicopter engine didn't sound normal, and a red light was on, and we're falling out of the sky. The second question, and I concluded that I couldn't know, and it didn't matter what had happened. The next question was, what is the risk to me of this situation? And I didn't know the answer to that either. So I immediately assumed the worst. And I remember distinctly, and this was more than 50 years ago, I remember this thought, this is how it's going to end. So this is how it's going to end. And we felt it was a controlled descent, although we had no power. And I didn't know about auto-rotation and some of the things that the pilots know that would have given me a different assessment of my risk. But nonetheless, we came down and the pilot auto-rotated, which means they pull back on the stick, and it increases the pitch in the rotor, and that gives you a little bit of a lift before you hit the ground. Unfortunately, he auto-rotated a little bit too high, so the last 15, 20 feet, we were all sitting in the helicopter, we fell that distance and hit the ground. what I didn't appreciate at the time was that we were falling, was what are we going to fall into? That would have changed my risk assessment to some degree, because if we'd fallen in a river, that would have been bad. If we'd fallen into the trees, that would have been bad. As it turned out, we fell into a field of elephant grass, which wasn't quite so bad because it's cushioned us a little bit. Once we hit the ground, the first question then was, okay, is everybody okay? And everybody seemed to be okay, except one of the pilot's feet went through the plexiglass and injured his leg, but not seriously. And it was within a few minutes, and the sky was full of helicopters giving us cover and making sure that we were safe, because my concern was, what if we're in the middle of a bunker complex and all of a sudden these Vietnamese guys jump out of the ground and make prisoners out of us? So the thing that amazed me in retrospect was the lack of fear. There was no fear for me. I accepted immediately that this could be a terminal event for me, but I was not afraid. And since that time, and that always surprised me, but since that time I've read some articles written about and by people who have had similar long-distance falls from the sky, if you will. These are people who jumped out of an airplane with a parachute and the parachute didn't open, or people who fell out of a plane for one reason or another. And there have been a number of people who've had this experience. And when I finished reading this article, it dawned on me there was no fear. The people had described no fear in this falling, and they had fallen a great distance. And that resonated with me. And so what I am thinking happened to the guys in the helicopter. They knew something was wrong. It was very rapidly that they assessed that this was a very serious, probably not survivable for them, but they were not afraid. There's a quiet, calm acceptance of what you are into that occurs under those circumstances. So I think that's and there, for most of them, there probably was no pain. Unless they were injured exiting the helicopter, there was no pain. Anybody know what the terminal velocity of a human body is in the air? 150, 125, 116 feet per second. So I don't know how high the helicopter was, but if it was 1,000 feet up, how long does it take to hit the ground at 116 feet per second? Not very long. So the comfort for me, thinking about my friends on the helicopter, and I knew all of them. I had taken care of them for the whole time I had been in Vietnam, and at that point I'd been there for 10 months. I knew all of them. I treated many of them as patients. The comfort came to me in knowing that there was no fear, that they had, as did I, in my experience, and as described by others, a very calm acceptance of what was going to be happening. And in the few moments that they had before they hit the ground, they were sending their thoughts to the families that were back. So I will stop acting like a baby and answer any questions that you might have.
Let's defer questions to the audience.
Thank you.